When we think about improving schools, we usually talk about best practices. These are strategies and policies that promise to transform schools and bring better outcomes. But here's a real question. Can what works in one place work everywhere? Hi, I am Tamara Richter, and today we're diving into the world of best practices in education. We will challenge the idea that these practices are universal solutions, and we will explore the concepts of policy borrowing and lending. Best practices refers to methods or policies that work really good in one particular context. And because of their success, they are usually used as examples worldwide. Think of Finland's student-centered approach or Singapore's approach to teacher training. After Finland was recognized for having the best education system in the world, everybody wanted to go to Finland and see what they're doing to bring their practices back home. But there's a catch. Education is deeply connected to cultural, economic, and social contexts. Copying a best practice from one country to another without adaptation often leads to failure. This process of adopting policies from other countries is known as policy borrowing, a term explored by scholars like David Phillips and Gita Steiner-Kamsi. Phillips describes policy borrowing as both appealing and risky, noting that while it provides opportunity to learn from global successes, it often ignores critical context differences. Policies that succeed in one region often fail elsewhere due to differences in resources, governance, and cultural values. Steiner-Kamsi emphasizes that the process of policy borrowing is deeply political, shaped by power dynamics and the need for legitimacy in global education rankings, like PISA. In the mid-20th century, the US began to emphasize standardized testing as a tool for assessing students' achievement and teacher effectiveness. This shift was partly inspired by educational practices in countries like the UK, where standardized exams had long been a tradition in shaping educational outcomes and pathways. The 1983 report, A Nation at Risk, highlighted concerns about the perceived decline in American education. Policymakers looked abroad to high-performing countries, particularly those using rigorous testing systems, to reform and improve the U.S. education system. In the early 2000s, the U.S. implemented No Child Left Behind, which tied federal funding to standardized test performance. This policy echoed testing models in countries like Germany, where exams are used to track students into academic or vocational pathways. Unlike Germany or the UK, the US has a decentralized education system. Implementing a standardized testing policy across diverse states, school districts, and socioeconomic contexts led to disparities and resistance. US schools began teaching to the test to get better outcomes at these standardized tests, narrowing curriculums and sidelining creative and critical thinking skills. Standardized testing did not account for broader student development or local educational priorities. The adoption of standardized testing in the US highlights the risks of policy borrowing without fully adapting the practice in the local context. While it brought attention to the need for accountability, it also exposed gaps in equity, resources allocation, and cultural fit that successful policies may not translate seamlessly into new environments. Rather than borrowing policies, education systems need to engage in policy learning. According to Phillips, policy learning focuses on understanding the principles behind successful practices and adapting them thoughtfully to local contexts. This approach involves asking, what makes this policy work when it's implemented? How can we modify it to fit our unique needs? And most importantly, how do we involve students, educators, and communities into this process? It's more about understanding what works in that particular context, and then bring the question back to us, back to your own context. Policy borrowing and lending can lead to meaningful innovation if done critically and thoughtfully. Steiner-Kamsi warns that without such reflection, we risk replicating inequalities and failing to address local challenges. Instead of asking what are the best practices, we should ask what can we learn from this and how can we adapt what we learn responsibly. Collaboration, humility, and local engagement are key to ensuring relevant and effective policies. Best practices are not universal solutions. To truly improve education, we need to move from borrowing to learning by prioritizing adaptation over imitation. How do we approach global education challenges? It's true that we can be isolated as a country and we have to participate in our now globalized world. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.